Okay, so today I'm going to walk everybody through how to retube and rebias the Friedman BE 100 Deluxe. Just a quick disclaimer here, if you don't feel comfortable doing this, then just take it to a tech, because there are extremely dangerous high voltages inside the amp. So just keep that in mind and be extremely careful. As long as you do your research and you know what you're doing and you're careful, it's really not a hard process. Just keep in mind that you need to be extremely careful while you're doing this. So the first step here, we're going to take the back plate off of the amp. After you get the back plate removed, what you're going to want to do is lay the amp down on its face. Do it carefully. What I'm doing here is I'm letting the knobs and stuff on the front plate hang just off the edge, so I'm not scratching anything up. You want to keep that in mind for the little switches on the front, so you're not, breaking those off or anything. Just kind of hang it off the edge of something, and then remove the screws from the bottom that are holding the chassis in. Now, after you get these screws removed that are holding the chassis in, you should be able to just reach inside and grab the amp by the transformers, and it'll slide right out. The tubes I chose to go with this time are the new tubes from TAD, the EL34 STR red base tubes that are made by PS Vane exclusively for TAD. What I had in there previously are the JJ EL34 2s, and they're not a bad tube at all. They're a little bit thicker in the low mids. They have an extended low end and extended high end, so they're kind of like an EL34 with some characteristics of a 6L6. If that's the kind of thing you're going for, they're actually a really great tube for that kind of sound. So you'll just want to wiggle back and forth a little bit while pulling up to get the old tubes out. They will be a little bit snug, so you just grab it, wiggle it around a little bit back and forth while you pull up, and it'll slide right out for you. One thing I did notice with these TADs is that they were really tight, the pins in the sockets, so I did have to put a little bit of pressure while I was pushing down to get them to go down all the way. Now what I will usually do once I get the new tubes in, I will grab the amp chassis and I will flip it over and let it rest on the transformers. That way I can get to the bias pot and the reading points inside the bottom of the amp. Okay, so now what we want to do is plug our speaker load back in and make sure our power cable's plugged up, and then power the amp on and turn it off of standby. If you look here, you see that tiny little pot and the word bias below it. That's the pot you're going to turn to adjust the bias. The silver left leg of this green resistor right here is where your testing point is, where you're going to get your reading with your red probe on your meter. Your black probe you'll want to ground to the chassis of the amp, as I'll show you in the next clip. Okay, so what you'll want to do is set your meter to 200 M, as you can see here. After you do that, you'll want to take your black probe. You're going to use it for ground. And you can see here, look at the chassis. I've slid it into this perfect little hole where one of the screws goes to hold it in place. So I don't even have to touch that. I've got both of my hands free. I can take just one hand with the red probe and touch it to the bottom of this left leg on the green capacitor, and it'll give you the reading for each individual tube. You can see here it's quite low. Dave Friedman recommends bias between 30 and 40. So this is quite low after I put these tubes in. So the first thing I want to mention about this bias pot, it's a 10-turn pot, meaning it takes 10 turns to equal one normal turn. So don't be alarmed if you have to turn it quite a bit to start seeing adjustments. So you'll want to take a small flathead insulated screwdriver to make your turns with, and just stick it in the slot of the pot and turn it. I'm turning it quite a bit, as you can see, because generally takes a lot with this little 10-turn pot to get your adjustments, and it was at 18. Okay, so all I'm doing now is I'm continuing to adjust the bias pot and take readings. I generally shoot for 32 for each tube. I think it's between 30 and 32 that Friedman sends them out from the factory, and I've found that to be right in the sweet spot, somewhere between 30 and 35, depending on how closely your tubes are matched. I think one of these was reading about a 30, and then the highest reading I had was like a 33, right at 33, and the other two were like 32.9, and I ended up settling on that. I'll usually set it and then play a little bit and make small adjustments to try to find the sweet spot, but I find right between 30 and 33 is usually a nice spot for this amp. That's my experience anyway. So if you just follow these steps, you can easily, rebias your amp and put new power tubes in. Like I said in the beginning, just be extremely careful and mindful while you're doing this, because, there are dangerous, lethal high voltages inside the amp. So you'll want to be extremely cautious. I try to use just one hand. I only touch the test point and turn that one little pot, and that's it. I think most people could handle doing that. Just like I said, do your research,